I gave my son a brand new SUV for his birthday. It was all paid off, and the title had his name on it. Just 10 minutes later, he handed me a drink tray and said, "Tip the help, my mom's your server tonight." Everyone around us started laughing, but I didn't. To them, it was a joke. To me, it felt like he was trying to cover up something he'd already taken from me. A month later, I invited him to dinner. I did something that he would remember for the rest of his life. But before I tell you that, think about this. What's one lesson you believe everyone should learn before it's too late? Anyway, that day, I handed him the keys like I was giving him another chance. The car was a shiny black Ford Bronco, parked right out front with a bright red bow that looked almost fake against all the Arizona dust. I'd saved for 5 years to buy that car. Every holiday bonus, every extra shift at the grocery store, every penny I could scrape together. When he was 16, he used to point at that exact model and say, "Someday," and I'd nod, like maybe that day would really come. Now here I was, 62 years old, feeling so worn out it hurt to stand, giving my only child a $62,000 dream come true. I didn't expect him to cry or make a big fuss, but I thought he might at least be proud. Nathan barely looked at it. He gave me a quick hug, didn't meet my eyes, already turning to see his friends pulling up in their Teslas and Range Rovers. His girlfriend, Carly, walked across the grass in her tall heels, her lips all tight like she smelled something cheap. The house was just a rental, an Airbnb mansion in Paradise Valley, packed with strangers, caterers, DJs, people I'd never met. I'd brought a casserole, mostly out of old habit. But Nathan waved it off like I'd embarrassed him. "Mom, just chill. Everything's taken care of," he said. Then he leaned in close, but he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Actually, can you help me out real quick?" He grabbed a shiny silver drink tray and shoved it into my hands. Then he turned me around to face the crowd. "Everyone, meet our waitress for the night," he said, smirking like it was the funniest thing ever. "Please tip her." They all laughed, some even clapped. I stood there holding that tray, the plastic cups shaking because my hands wouldn't stay still. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was trying to get out. My smile was stuck on my face, like my mouth forgot how to work. Nathan walked off. Carly whispered something to her friend, and they both giggled. I carried the tray to the edge of the patio and set it down. I just kept moving, pretending none of it hurt. My knees were shaking. I didn't cry. Not then. I walked inside, past the fancy kitchen that wasn't ours, into a bathroom with gold faucets and folded towels. I locked the door, sat on the toilet lid, and stared at the floor, wishing it could tell me why. That's when I heard them talking through the vent. Carly's voice came through clear as day. "Told you the car would shut her up," she said. Nathan's voice sounded tired. "Still need the other paper signed. She's dragging it out." Carly again. "Just get her to dinner next week." She caved. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I waited until they were gone. When I finally stood up, I felt different. Not broken. Not even mad yet. Just done. I rinsed my face, wiped my cheeks, and fixed my makeup like none of it mattered. Then I walked out, smiling like I was fine. In the kitchen, I found my casserole in the trash. Still untouched, I left it there. On my way out, I passed the Bronco again. The ball was crooked now. I didn't fix it. I didn't even look back. I drove home, turned off my phone, and poured myself a glass of wine I didn't want. My hands were shaking so bad, I had to hold the glass with both. That wasn't just embarrassment. It was something else's show, a trick. And if I knew my son, and I did, he never did anything that bold without a reason. Something bigger was coming. I just didn't know what yet, but I was going to find out. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. I kept hearing Carly's voice over and over, like a mean little bedtime story. "Told you the car would shut her up." That wasn't just Maine, it was planned. I got up at 4:30 in the morning and made coffee. I didn't even drink. I sat at my little kitchen table, staring at the old lockbox I hadn't touched in years. Inside were my most important papers, my birth certificate, Nathan's, my divorce papers, my father's will, and one deed. One piece of paper that proved I still owned the old house Nathan called Grandpa's haunted shack. I'd kept it in my name all these years because it was the only thing that was still mine. I had kept that old house in my name ever since I left my family behind. I always thought if I ever really needed money, I could sell it. But when I looked in my lockbox, the deed was gone. I started tearing my place apart, every file drawer, every envelope, even the junk folders stuffed with old tax papers and expired coupons. Still nothing. At 9 in the morning, I called the Maricopa County Assessor's office. I told the clerk I needed to check who owned a property that was supposed to be mine. He asked for the parcel number, but all I had was the address. He looked it up, and then he paused. "It shows a transfer of ownership," he said. My heart started beating faster. "To who?" I asked. "Omnicore Investments," he said. I swallowed hard. "When did that happen?" "6 weeks ago," he told me. My mouth went dry. "Who signed the transfer?" He read the name, David Monroe. "My brother." I hung up before I could start screaming. David, the same brother I hadn't talked to in over 10 years. The same one who borrowed money 3 times and never paid it back. The one who once told Nathan at a funeral that I was a control freak. That David. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my messages until I found Nathan's last text from 2 weeks ago. "Dinner soon." My hands were still shaking when I typed back, "Yes, let's talk." Then I called my friend Tasha. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm getting a weird feeling," I told her. She didn't even ask what happened. She just said, "I'm already putting on pants." 20 minutes later, she was in my kitchen, flipping through my papers and trying not to curse too loud. "You think they forged your signature?" she asked. "Or maybe tricked you into signing when you were out of it on meds?" I blinked, and then it hit me: my eye surgery. That day in April when Nathan brought over some papers, he'd said, "Mom, just sign this real quick for insurance stuff." I hadn't even looked. I was still groggy from the anesthesia. I'd signed 5 or 6 pages without thinking twice. "I think they used that moment," I whispered. "They got me when I was weak." Tasha didn't say anything for a whole minute. Then she looked me straight in the eye. "We need to get mean." She pulled out her old laptop and started digging. Within minutes, she found it. Omnicore Investments, with Carly Ortega listed as the only officer. It wasn't even hidden. Seeing her name there felt like someone slapped me. That fancy SUV wasn't really a gift. It was hush money, a shiny red bow, to keep me quiet while they stole what was mine. They hadn't just thought I wouldn't notice. They hadn't even thought I'd fight back. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to tear the whole thing apart calmly, publicly, and for good. But not yet. First, I needed proof. Not just guesses and hunches. Real evidence, something I could hold in court or shove in their faces when the time was right. I needed to hear Nathan admit it out loud. And if there was one thing I knew about my son, it was this. All it would take was a fake dinner, a few drinks, and the right question to get him bragging. He could never resist showing off when he thought he'd already won. So I started planning. I set the trap. This time, I was the one hiding in the hallway. For the next 3 days, I played dumb. I smiled at Nathan's texts and acted like everything was normal, even though my mind was racing, trying to think of every angle they could use to cover their tracks. I went back through my old emails, searching for any little clue, a document, a line of text, anything that proved they slipped the deed in with my medical forms. Nothing obvious came up. The only files Carly had ever emailed me were labeled medical claims and insurance disclosures. They looked so ordinary that even if I'd been fully awake, I probably wouldn't have questioned them. It was the perfect setup. Wait until I was too drugged to notice, tuck the stolen deed in a pile of real paperwork, get me to sign, and file it under a company no one would look for. I got out a fresh notebook and started writing down everything I could remember, every date, every word. She didn't even ask. Still need the paper signed. Get her to dinner next week. Every bit of that bathroom conversation turned into evidence. I double-checked Omnicore Investments and found it was only created 2 months ago, through an online legal service in Arizona. No business address, no website, just a shell company with Carly's name front and center. That told me this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment cash grab. This was planned, built, filed, executed. And here I was, the fool who bought the getaway car and tied a big red bow on top. I started making copies of everything: mails, screenshots, property records, business filings on. I put them all in a folder. Because the next time they looked me in the eye and tried to lie, I'd be ready. I labeled the folder Final, then did something I'd sworn I wouldn't. I called David. He didn't answer the first 3 times, but on the 4th try, he picked up, his voice all fake and cheery, and it made my stomach twist. "Well, look who it is, my favorite big sister," he said, like we were still kids playing in Grandpa's yard. "Save it," I snapped. You notarized a fake property transfer with my name on it. I didn't sign anything on purpose, and you know it. Now, you're going to tell me why you helped my son steal from me." He went quiet for a moment. Then he finally said, "It was Nathan's idea. He told me you were giving him the house, that you just didn't want to mess with all the legal stuff yourself. And you believed that," I hissed. Without even calling me, without checking, he started rambling about taxes and how Carly had shown him a spreadsheet that made it all look legit. I cut him off. "You knew I was recovering from surgery. You knew I was vulnerable. You knew damn well I wouldn't hand over Dad's house like it was a bottle of ketchup." He didn't argue, he just sighed. "I needed the notarizing fee," he mumbled. "Rent's been tough." That was it. He sold out our family name for a couple $100. I hung up without saying another word. That night, Tasha came over, with takeout and a cheap bottle of wine. She sat across from me at the kitchen table while I sorted everything into neat manila folders, like I was preparing for court. "You really going to do this?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm going to invite them all to dinner, Nathan, Carly, and David. I'm going to feed them like family, and then I'm going to bury them like enemies." She grinned and raised her glass. "Well then," she said, "let's make sure the main course is scorched earth." We stayed up until 2 in the morning, printing, sorting, highlighting. The last thing I did before bed was pull out the last photo I had of my dad the day he signed that deed over to me. He was standing in the driveway of the old house, grease on his shirt, a beer in his hand, smiling like he was finally proud of something he'd built. I touched his face in the photo and whispered, "Don't worry, I'll fix this. I'm not letting them take what you left me." Then I turned out the light and started counting down the days until dinner. I didn't expect to get a break so fast. But sometimes the truth slips out when you're not even trying to hear it. It was Tasha who found an old voicemail she almost deleted because she thought it was spam. She played it out loud in her work break room, half listening, until Nathan's voice came through, clear as day. "Once she signs the rest, it's done," he said. "I don't care if she figures it out later." Then Carly's voice, faint in the background, "Just keep smiling. She's still soft from the car." Those words hit me like a truck. Soft from the car. Like the Bronco was nothing but a bribe. Like all the years I'd spent working overtime and saving every penny were just part of their plan to rob me blind while I stood there, smiling like an idiot. I had Tasha forward me the voicemail. I saved it in 3 places on my phone, on a flash drive, and in an encrypted folder. My hands were shaking when I labeled the file proof. That voicemail changed everything. It wasn't just about hurt feelings anymore. It was legal. It was fraud, manipulation, and conspiracy, and I had their voices saying it out loud. But more than that, it was the final nail in whatever hope I'd been clinging to, that Nathan was still my son, still someone I could reach. That voice on the message wasn't my boy. That was a thief, a snake, someone who saw me as nothing but an obstacle to step over. And in that moment, I realized something. The funeral wasn't in the future. It had already happened. I'd just been too stubborn to admit it. The next day, I printed transcripts, built timelines, and traced every paper trail I could find. I even called a friend of Tasha's, who used to work in real estate law. Just to be sure I wasn't imagining this, she confirmed I'd signed those papers while medicated, and they'd been mixed in with my real medical forms. It was textbook fraud, and possibly criminal. I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but I didn't. I just kept working. There was no room for feelings anymore. Only strategy. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the voicemail again with my earbuds in. I memorized every word, every smug little pause, and by the 4th time I replayed it, I wasn't angry anymore. I felt focused, almost cold. I realized I didn't just want them caught, I wanted them caught in a way they couldn't twist around or talk their way out of. I wanted it public, undeniable, and permanent. That's when I started planning the dinner. Not a quiet talk in a lawyer's office, not a private scolding behind closed doors. No, I wanted them surrounded by the people who used to think they were good family friends who watched Nathan grow up, people who'd seen me pour everything I had into raising him. I wanted every lie to fall apart right there, in front of everyone. Tasha was on board before I even finished explaining. "We'll need cameras," she said. "You've got a Ring doorbell, but that won't be enough. We'll hide a couple of GoPros in the light fixtures." She was calm and steady, like she'd done this before. And honestly, She probably had. Tasha had been through more betrayals than most people could handle. And nothing shook her anymore. We picked a date 3 weeks out. The next day, I invited Nathan. I texted Carly directly too, just to be sure. Dinner at my place, family only, just like old times. They both replied with fake excitement. Can't wait, Nathan wrote. He even added a heart emoji. I stared at that little red heart for 5 whole minutes, thinking about all the times I'd believed his smiles were real. All the times I'd told myself his distance was just stress or growing pains. But now I knew better. He hadn't drifted away, he'd been drifting with a purpose. And I'd been too trusting to see it. I started practicing what I'd say, in the mirror, in the car, out loud while folding laundry. I pictured Carly's face when I played the voicemail, David's panic when I showed him the notarization timeline, Nathan's silence when I looked him straight in the eye and told him he wasn't my son anymore. I played that scene out 100 different ways, and in every version, I won. Not by screaming, not by getting revenge, just by laying out the facts with calm fury and making sure they couldn't hide anymore. That voicemail wasn't just a slip-up, it was a gift. And I was going to use it to flip the whole damn table. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, a week after I sent the dinner invite. Nathan showed up at my door without warning. He was holding a grocery store bouquet and wearing that nervous grin he used to have when he broke something as a kid and didn't want to get in trouble. I opened the door and let him in without a word. Mostly, I just wanted to see how far he'd go. He walked in like he owned the place, set the flowers on the counter like they erased everything, and said, "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking." He gave me that look he thinks still works, the half-fake one, like he's practicing being humble instead of actually feeling it. "I know I messed up," he went on. "That party vet wasn't cool. I thought it was funny, but I crossed a line. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and pointed to the kitchen table. He sat down in the same spot where he used to do his homework 25 years ago. For a second, I almost believed he was still that little boy who asked me how to spell embarrassed and needed me to check the closet for monsters before bed. But that boy was gone. I poured him some coffee and sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, pretending to be calm. He started in on a whole speech about how he'd been caught up in work, how Carly was pressuring him to grow up, how he felt disconnected from his roots. It was all empty buzzwords, nothing real, just a sloppy watercolor of regret, he hoped. Mistake for an apology. "I want to fix things," he said, staring at me like he thought he could still win me over. "That's why I think dinner's a great idea. We can reset, start fresh. Just you and me." I smiled and said, "That's all I want to pit." He left with a hug that felt more like he was checking my pockets. As soon as the door clicked shut, I grabbed my phone and texted Tasha. He took the bait. What Nathan didn't know was that my phone had been recording the whole talk from my apron pocket. Not for court, not even for evidence. Just so I could play it back later and remind myself that none of it was real. 2 nights later, the cracks started showing. Carly called my never calls and left a voicemail meant for Nathan. She must have mixed up the numbers. That little mistake gave me everything I needed. Her voice was sharp, no fake sweetness. She bought it. "Dinner's happening. Make sure you bring the rest of the paperwork this time. David said he needs her signature on that last clause before the title moves clean." My blood went cold. The flowers, the apology, the coffee. It had all been a setup to finish what they started. They thought if they softened me up enough, I'd sign one last time, smile while they stabbed me in the back, and walk right into losing the last thing I owned. That old house was the last thing I owned that was really worth anything. But what they didn't know was that I was already 5 steps ahead of them. I saved Carly's voicemail and added it to my evidence folder. That weekend, Tasha came over to help me set up 3 small hidden cameras in the dining room. She was calm, like this was just another Saturday project. She put one camera inside a fake plant, one tucked up in the hanging light fixture, and another behind the vent grate. We tested every angle, checked the sound, and made sure nothing blinked or glowed. No wires, no clues, just quiet little eyes watching everything. I even bought 2 extra dining chairs so nobody could slide away when things started unraveling. I printed a seating chart so I could box them in. Nathan right across from me, Carly to his left, David beside her. I wanted them trapped, nowhere to look but at each other when the truth landed. By Sunday, I had my folder tabbed and labeled like a lawyer's exhibit deed transfers. business registrations, voicemails, surgery timelines, notarization logs, signature comparisons, everything neat and airtight. I'd planned 100 dinners in that house over the years, birthday parties, graduations, Sunday meals, just because, but this one was different. This one wasn't about food. This was war disguised as family. And they had no idea they were walking into their own eulogy. I cleaned my house like I was scrubbing a crime scene, not because I cared what they thought, because I wanted everything to look perfect, calm, in control, like the quiet before a storm. The table was set for 6. Me, at the head, Nathan and Carly side by side, David next to Carly, Tasha at the far end as my anchor, and one empty chair, just to make them wonder. I used my mother's old linen tablecloth, the one we only pulled out on holidays. The plates were laid out like a peace offering, but really, they were the start of an ambush. The folder of evidence was hidden in a hollowed-out cookbook on the counter. The cameras were live, and I'd tucked a backup audio recorder inside the base of a flower vase, right in the center of the table. Tasha came early to help me plate the food: roast chicken, scalloped potatoes, green beans with bacon. Even though we both knew no one would really be eating once the truth came out, I wanted to do it right. I wanted them to remember that I'd hosted them like family one last time. Nathan showed up first, wearing a pressed button-down shirt, smiling that politician's smile that never reached his eyes. Carly came behind him, fake laughing, holding a bottle of wine like it could buy her some charm. David shuffled in last, smelling faintly of sweat and cheap bourbon, his eyes already darting around like he knew something was off. I greeted them like nothing was wrong. I took their jackets, poured their drinks, and made small talk as if I hadn't already decided exactly how this night would end. We sat down just as the sun was slipping low, painting the dining room in soft gold light, the kind of light that makes people relax and lower their guard. We toasted to family. I clinked glasses and swallowed back the bile in my throat. The first 10 minutes were stiff, full of forced compliments about the house, the food, the weather. I let them talk. I watched Carly steer every conversation back to the future investments, business opportunities, plans. David said almost nothing, just kept drinking too fast. Nathan kept glancing at Carly like he needed her nod just to keep talking. I waited until the plates were half empty and the wine had softened their reflexes. Then I smiled. I stood up and walked over to the counter, picking up the hollowed-out cookbook. I pulled out a stack of sealed envelopes, one for each of them. Before dessert, I said, I have a little something I'd like us all to do together. Just a small activity to wrap up the evening. Nathan gave a nervous laugh. Carly lifted an eyebrow, her mouth pinched. David just looked tired. I handed them each an envelope. What's this? Carly asked, her voice suddenly tight. A thank you, I said. From me to you. Go ahead. Open them. They looked at each other, then slowly unfolded the papers. At first, their faces were blank. Then the recognition set in. Carly's mouth twitched. Nathan blinked like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. David just stared, pale as a ghost. Inside each envelope was a full copy of everything: transcripts, screenshots, voicemails, public records, notarization logs, every piece of proof. I sat back down and folded my hands in my lap. I know what you did, I said quietly. I know how you did it, and I know exactly who helped you. I didn't invite you here tonight for an apology. I invited you to tell you this is the last meal you'll ever share with me as a family. Carly broke first, her voice sharp, trying to sound tough. This doesn't prove anything, she snapped. It's all circumstantial. I didn't even look at her. I looked straight at Nathan and said, you used my trust. You used the fact that I was vulnerable. You used my own name to steal from me. You got my brother to help you make it look official. And you used that car to distract me. You treated me like I was just some fool you could trick. But here's the thing. You did all of it on camera. Every word, every lie, every fake apology. You didn't cover your tracks. You left a trail behind, and now it's all mine. He didn't say a single word. He just sat there staring at the folder like he hoped it would burst into flames and disappear. I stood up again and reached for the last thing I had prepared, a small flash drive in a clear case. I set it right in the middle of the table. This has all the footage from tonight, I said, every second. You won't stop me from using it. And if you even try, I'll make sure every person who ever shook your hand sees exactly who you are. Nobody touched their drinks after that. Nobody finished eating. Nobody looked at me when I left the room and let them sit there, choking on everything they thought they'd gotten away with. I could have ended it right there. I could have come back in, cleared the plates, and let the heavy silence do the rest, but that wouldn't have been enough. Not until I said the words out loud. Not until I named exactly what they'd done. I waited just outside the doorway for a few seconds, letting them squirm in their own guilt. Then I walked back in. I didn't sit down this time. I stood at the head of the table, my hands at my sides, not yelling or crying, just done. Nathan looked up at me with that lost, searching look, like he thought maybe I'd still feel sorry for him. Carly sat stiff, arms crossed, trying to pretend she was in control. David just stared at his empty glass like he wanted to crawl inside it and disappear. I cleared my throat and said, I thought a lot about what to say here, how to explain what you took from me, but the truth is, you didn't just steal a house or a piece of paper. You took me. You emptied out the last thing I had that felt real, the last piece of my father, of my name, of everything I built from nothing, and you did it while smiling at me and calling me Mom. I looked Nathan right in the eyes, and when he finally looked back, I didn't see any trace of the boy I raised, just a stranger. So here's what I'm taking back, I said, my voice steady. I'm taking back my name, my boundaries, and any idea that blood automatically means love. As of tonight, I don't consider you my son. You are not my family. You are not my legacy. You are just a man who stole from a woman who would have died for you. He blinked hard, like he thought maybe if he stared long enough, I'd change my mind. But I didn't. Then I turned to Carly. I hope you got everything you wanted out of this, I told her. Because what you've taken can't be returned. And what you've ruined can't be cleaned up with wine and fake smiles. Finally, I looked at David. You were dead to me a long time ago, I said quietly. This just makes it official. No one said a word. No one moved. The air was thick with all the lies they'd finally been forced to face. I reached under the table and pulled out the last folder I'd prepared. Inside was an official letter from my lawyer papers that ended any right they had to my money or my name. A cease and desist, warning them never to use my identity again. A notice that I was filing for a fraud investigation. I placed it in front of Nathan. This goes into effect immediately, I said. You will not get a single dollar from my Eva. You will not speak for me. You will not speak about me. And you will not come to my funeral. You are a stranger. Then I turned and walked out of the dining room, out of my own house, and stepped onto the front porch. The night air hit me like freedom. I stood there for a moment, listening. No voices behind me. No footsteps coming after me. No apologies, just silence, the kind that let me know they understood I meant every word. That was the night I buried a son, not with a coffin or a gravestone, but with the truth and a stack of receipts. I posted the footage that same night, not because I was being spiteful, but because I needed to survive it. Because if I didn't tell the story myself, they'd twist it. And I wasn't about to let the same people who humiliated me in front of strangers also rewrite how it ended. I uploaded the video without my name on it, using a throwaway account Tasha helped me set up. We kept it short, no long explanations or fancy edits. Just the plain, ugly truth in their own voices. The clip started with Nathan cracking that joke at his party. Then it jumped right to Carly's voicemail. Next came the recording of our dinner, where not one of them denied what they did, they just tried to make it sound smaller than it was. And at the end, my voice saying, "You are not my son anymore." We didn't bother adding music, we didn't need to. The internet took care of the rest. By the next morning, 3,000 people had shared it on Facebook. By lunch, it had spread to 20,000 on TikTok. By dinner, it was on the local news with the headline, "Mother disowns son after he steals her house and throws her under the bus." People flooded the comments. Some were crying, some were furious, some were tagging their own kids with notes like, "Watch your back." It caught fire faster than I ever expected. I watched it all from bed on my phone. One tab had the video. The other was my email, already full of messages from reporters and podcast hosts who wanted me to tell my story. I ignored every single one. I didn't post the video for attention. I posted it because I wanted the truth to live somewhere they couldn't delete it. By the end of the week, Nathan's HVAC business was drowning in monster reviews calling him a liar, a thief, and a coward. Someone sent Carly's voicemail to the state board, along with proof of the fake deed transfer. Her real estate license got suspended while they investigated. David disappeared. No social media, No texts, nothing. He vanished like the coward he was. 3 days later, Nathan finally texted me. Please call me. I didn't know it would get this far. I read it and deleted it. Because it was never about how far it went. It was about how far they were willing to drag me down before I woke up. My voicemail was suddenly full of strangers, most of them thanking me, a few asking for advice, and one woman sobbing about how her own son had emptied her bank account without her knowing. That's when it hit me. Wasn't alone. I wasn't some rare case. I was just the one who decided to speak up. Tasha printed out the best comments and taped them to my fridge like little victory medals. One read, "Hero Mom." Another said, "This woman needs a Netflix deal." We laughed about it, but behind my smile, I knew something big had shifted inside me. I had spent my whole life shrinking myself, trying to be the good mother, the one who was quiet, forgiving, always giving people one more chance. But now I didn't owe anyone my silence. Not anymore. The house was still mine. The title was back in my name, thanks to the legal papers I'd filed the same day as that dinner. Nathan was served notice through his lawyer that if he ever tried to lay claim to my property or money again, I'd take him to court for felony fraud. I wasn't bluffing. I would have spent my last breath in a courtroom before I let him steal from me again. Carly, for her part, tried one last desperate move. She sent me a message with a flimsy apology and a note that said, "We all make mistakes." I wrote back just once. "Mistakes are accidents. You planned yours." Then I blocked her. I knew the internet wouldn't stay mad forever. Eventually, the attention would fade, and people would move on. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that the truth now had a timestamp record they couldn't scrub clean, even if the world forgot my name. Nathan and Carly would never be able to forget that dinner where everything they built on lies burned to the ground right in front of them. That was the justice I needed. Not revenge, clarity, closure, and finally, control. 2 months later, he showed up. No text, no warning, just a knock at my door like he thought I might have forgotten what he'd done. Like maybe if he stood there long enough with his tired eyes and wrinkled shirt, I'd let it all go. I watched him through the peephole, holding my breath. Part of me wanted to leave him standing out there in the dark, but another part needed to see his face one last time, to see if the man who betrayed me could even pretend to look like the boy I raised. I opened the door. He looked smaller, not in his body, but in his spirit. Like whatever armor he'd been wearing had finally rusted away. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice soft and cracked, the way people sound when they already know they've lost but don't have the words to admit it. I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside. He walked in slowly, hands shoved into his pockets, eyes moving around the living room like it was a crime scene he didn't recognize anymore. I offered him coffee, not out of kindness, just out of habit. If I was going to end this, I needed to see it through. We sat at the table in silence until he finally spoke. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second, I felt a flicker of sympathy, not for the man in front of me, but for the small boy he used to be, the pieces of him buried under everything he'd built on top of me. Then he started crying. Quiet at first, then the kind of shaking sobs that come from some place deeper than guilt, closer to grief. "I didn't mean to hurt you like that," he said. "Carly had all these plans, and I thought if I could just get that house, flip it, get the money, we'd be set. I wasn't thinking. I was stupid. I was scared. I let him talk. I let him pour out every excuse, every confession, every plea for some scrap of forgiveness. When he finally ran out of words, I said, 'You weren't scared. You were selfish. You didn't make a mistake. You made a plan. You just thought I was too old, too soft, too stupid to catch you.' He winced, but he didn't deny it. 'I don't expect you to forgive me,' he whispered, staring down at the table. 'I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do.' I looked at him then, and what I saw was a man who only wanted the pain to be over, not because he felt it, but because he couldn't stand being seen as the villain. 'There's nothing else to do,' I said. 'You already did it. And you're right, I don't forgive you. But I don't hate you, either. I just don't know you anymore, and you don't know me.' He looked up, searching my face for something, mercy, memory, a way back. I didn't offer any. I stood up and walked to the door. He followed. No more words. I opened the door and stepped aside. As he passed, I set my hand lightly on his shoulder, not as a mother, not as a goodbye, just as a mark, a quiet way of saying this was the end. He stepped out onto the porch, turned like he might say something else. I closed the door before he could. Then I leaned against it and let the silence wash over me. Not the kind of peace that comes from fixing something, the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone to turn back into who they used to be. It took 3 more weeks of paperwork to clear the fraud and put the house fully back in my name. When the county mailed me the new deed, with my name printed clean and bold at the top, I sat down on the floor and held it in my lap like it was something alive. It didn't feel like triumph. Not the gloating, victorious kind people imagine. It felt quiet, steady, certain. The house had never been about money. It was my father's sweat in the walls, my birthdays in the living room, my mother's chipped teacups still in the cabinets. It had somehow turned into the last battlefield in a war I didn't even know I was fighting until it almost ended me. When I moved back in, there was no announcement, no celebration. Just me, a rented truck, and Tasha with a box of cinnamon rolls and an old Bluetooth speaker blasting Dolly Parton while we unpacked. Inside, it smelled like dust and forgotten years. But it was mine again. I painted the kitchen walls a soft yellow. I replaced the broken blinds. I pulled weeds until my hands ached. There was something holy about that work fixing. What other people thought they could just ruin and leave behind. I turned the spare bedroom into a place for women like me who needed somewhere to land when their families decided they were disposable. I called it the nest. It felt safe, small, full of purpose. By the 3rd month, 2 women were already living there, helping me keep the place running. I didn't advertise. I didn't file for grants. I just did it quietly, like planting seeds, and trusting they'd grow. One day, Tasha handed me a small package. Inside was the Bronco key I'd given Nathan. A note in his handwriting said, "I left it at your curb." I didn't know what else to do. I never checked if the truck was really there. I didn't need to. Maybe he meant it literally. Maybe he just needed to give something back, even if it was too late. I mounted that key on the wall by the front door, next to a small wooden plaque I made with my soldering iron. It said, "She wasn't just the help." Some people who came to the nest asked what it meant. Some didn't. I never explained. That part of the story wasn't for them. Every Sunday, I walked through the house and laid my hand on every wall, reminding it on myself that it was safe again, that no one would ever use it as a weapon against love. Sometimes I still got letters from strangers who had seen the video, people thanking me for doing what they couldn't. Some were from women who whispered they'd finally cut their own sons off too, and they wanted to know what came next. I always wrote back the same thing. You start over. That's what comes next. You build from the quiet up. The story didn't end, not really, but it closed. And sometimes, closure isn't about revenge or justice. It's just about taking your own name back and putting it on the front door. My name is Evelyn Monroe. I am 62 years old. I am not anyone's waitress, anyone's fool, or anyone's fallback plan. I am the woman who was left, laughed at, and nearly erased, and I am still standing. This house, this key, these walls, they are mine, and I am whole again.